Welcome to Medical Matters Weekly with Dr. Trey Dobson, presented by Southwestern Vermont Healthcare and Catamount Access Television.
Welcome, everyone. Today is actually March 28th. We are recording this show for a later broadcast, maybe this week or next or the following. I'm Trey Dobson, Chief Medical Officer at Southwestern Vermont Medical Center and an emergency medicine physician with Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health. And this is Medical Matters Weekly, a show about the aspects of healthcare that matter to you most. And my guest today is Chris Maltby of Tough Mudder, an internationally recognized mud and obstacle race. So welcome, Chris. We're so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
A little about Chris's background. He oversees the development of racer experiences and events for Tough Mudder. And everyone's heard about Tough Mudder, but you might not know the details. So we're going to go into that. He previously co-founded Pine Coast Culture Company, if I'm reading this right, which is a New Jersey-based, am I going to pronounce this right? Kombucha?
You nailed it.
Kombucha Brewery, which I believe is a tea, but I'm going to let him explain that. Studied neurobiology and physiology at the University of Maryland, so that is an interesting background. Worked with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in a developmental biology laboratory at Johns Hopkins. And maybe more relevant or most relevant, or maybe not as relevant, he's an avid ultramarathoner and traveler. So again, we're so psyched to have you here. We've had some really interesting guests. I'll say that your background is quite interesting. We've had Olympic mountain bikers. We have had ultra runners before. So this is an excellent way to continue our promotion of healthcare. Also means health wellness. So let me just go right to the word I stumbled on. So what is kombucha?
Yeah, so kombucha is a fermented probiotic tea. So you're very close. It's tea based, and it's been around in some form or fashion for thousands of years. So very much like sauerkraut or other lacto fermented products. You take a sweetened tea, and there's a culture that's a symbiotic blend of yeast and bacteria that actually consume the sugar and turn it into gut healthy bacteria.
Is it a drink that ultra runners often seek out?
So yeah, it's interesting. It is catching on for ultra runners, and that's actually what got me, really into home brewing it, and eventually into starting a business, selling it. You hear a lot from ultra marathoners, and it was true for myself that gut health and digestion is such a hard part of the ultra running experience. You've taken so many calories on the go, and at some point your stomach just can't keep up. You'll hear those famous quotes of, it's really an eating marathon with running in between, it was pretty true. So I started to introduce kombucha and really saw the benefits, and it's starting to grow a little more widely in the community now.
Well, that's great. As an ultra runner myself, although a weak one at that, maybe I need some kombucha. So I'll ask you about it after the show, and you can direct me, and I can continue our conversation. That's interesting. That's probably why I've heard of it, right? Just at a race or something. So what drew you into neurobiology and physiology? I'm just interested.
Yeah, so I, always just been kind of a curious guy, and I was going off to college and couldn't figure out exactly what I wanted to look into. And my freshman year, I took a couple classes and was sort of hooked on it. I found the research that goes into, physiology super interesting, the way they would set up, some of these studies to sort of elucidate the pathways in the brain and the body. And so I got hooked on that and just, the problem solving aspect of it. So I thought at the time maybe medical school was in the future. So I, was really concentrated on my studies while I was at college. I found it fascinating, and then I went off to a research lab for a couple of years just to see what the industry was like as well.
And in that lab, were you actually working with this? This is my medicine asking you this question: humans, or what, were you working with animals, or both?
Yeah, so it was mostly a Drosophila, so fruit fly based research we were doing. I was working with a fellow named Duo Japan, who's a really brilliant investigator. Sure. He's at UT Southwestern now, but he had been at Johns Hopkins at the time as a Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigator, and he had found this pathway called the Hippo Pathway, which was implicated in the regulation of cell growth. So for the medical field, heavily related to cancer. There's this pathway that basically tells cells when to stop growing. So he found the first novel gene in that pathway, and then has spent the rest of his career sort of finding all of the steps in that pathway that sort of lead to that regulation. So had the opportunity to work with some really brilliant PhDs and DJ Pan himself while I was there, which was a really cool experience. It was great to see that side of the industry, great to sort of get my toes into the water there, and be right in the thick of it.
So when you were there in the lab, how long ago were you in that lab roughly?
That has been, gosh, now it's taking me back. That was 12 years ago now. Yeah, I was fresh out of college for a couple of years.
And were you an ultra runner then?
I wasn't. I stayed active. I liked the outdoors. I would hike a lot. I had been a swimmer in high school and college. I was actually a really, really bad runner up until, probably 2012 or so. Yeah. So I was getting a little bit more into fitness then, but I hadn't taken the full dive into ultra running until I came over to Tough Mudder.
You point out something. We've talked about this in our show before, especially when we had Tim Van Orden on, and he was into running raw, and you might know of Tim. And we talked about you really can pick up running anytime in your life. And I think a lot of people are scared of it. And you don't need to go out and run ultra marathons, but it's the couch to 5K is a real thing that's really important for the mental and physical. And I'll stop because people are used to hearing me talk about that. I mean, I probably like it because I do it myself, right? So anything you do yourself, you tend to think is good. So if you go back to this lab, and I keep going back to it because it's just so interesting to me. How does that affect your work today and then translate into what you do today, or does it at all?
Yeah, it does. I think first and foremost, I worked with some of the hardest workers I've ever come across while I was there, which was just great, fresh out of college, to get a glimpse into that work ethic. But it's kind of funny to think of it this way, but the scientific method in general, heavily, influences the way we do product design now at Tough Mudder. Come up with a hypothesis, the experience we want to create. We go out, we'll test out a few different options, we'll take them back. We'll tinker with them. We see if they're doing, what we want them to. If they're not, we'll cut them. If they need to be adjusted, we adjust them. And if they're functioning well, then we roll with them. It's when we design the products, it's interesting. It's sort of like a catalyst in a reaction. We're just putting something out there to help the experience, the reaction we want from our participants to go through. And we're just putting the toys out there to create these cool adventures for our participants. So we sort of approach it that way, with a logical setup, a hypothesis to test, and then take the results and interpret them as needed.
I love that comparison. You're so right. I mean, the scientific method is the basis. Standardization is what leads to reliable outcomes, but innovation is what leads to improved outcomes. So you develop a standardized approach that's you're going to be able to replicate, it's going to come out on the other end, and then you can do some innovation to see, does this make an improvement or not? So that's great. So tell us a little bit. I have to be honest here and say, as much as I enjoy outdoor activities and climbing and running have been my basis for many years, I actually know very little about Tough Mudder. I just never got the opportunity to be involved in a race. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, well, you came to the right guy. I'm happy to talk about it all for longer than your listeners want to hear. But so Tough Mudder, sort of the 101, is an outdoor obstacle course adventure. So, it's a little bit unique in the space in that it's not a race. It's not timed. The obstacles that we put out there aren't mandatory. You can bypass them if you want to. If you don't feel up for it, you can come back next time and try it. And they're heavily teamwork based. So you can come alone to the event, but there's tons of runners out on the course that'll stop and turn around and help a stranger behind them, which sort of sets it apart from a lot of the other races out there in the industry. And we offer a couple different distances, a couple different formats. So we have a 5K event, a 10K event, a 15K event. All three of those generally happen on the same weekend, between the Saturday and a Sunday of an event weekend. And then we also have a full endurance series, which has a slight competitive aspect, but those are, sort of how you start to toe into the longer distance stuff. They're time-based, so We have Tough Mudder Infinity, which is an 8-hour event. It's based on running loops, as many as you want to or you can in an 8-hour period. We have a Toughest, which is an overnight 12-hour event. And then we have our World's Toughest Mudder we do once a year. It's sort of a big end of season community gathering. It's a 24-hour overnight ultra marathon event. So we've got something in there for everybody and a nice little progression to sort of toe in. If you just want to have a fun weekend outside, all the way up to if you want to do an ultra marathon and really, see where your limits are.
Well, so I actually learned just a ton there, Chris, probably more than many people in the audience who know. I didn't realize that the distances were standardized, at least to a degree, the difference. So that's interesting. Are the obstacles tend to be standardized, or do those vary depending on resources and location?
Yeah, so it's sort of a split there. So most of our obstacles you can expect to see at any event. There's more obstacles on a 15K course than there are in a 5, but we really select the subset of them to generate the same overall experience. So you can expect the same challenges, you can expect a ton of teamwork, no matter which distance you run. It's not really about a 5K being easier than a 10K or easier than a 15K. It's all about having the experience you want on that weekend. And then, when we're at a great venue, and we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming event up in Vermont this summer, but when we're at a cool venue like a ski mountain, we will take advantage of natural features there, the ski mountains, if there's a lake, anything of that nature. We really design into the course to make the most out of the environment that we're in.
So I'm really going off script here because I'm learning so much. So let's go back to you mentioned it's not time. So is there a winner of the Tough Mudder, or is everyone a winner?
Everyone's a winner, yeah. So it's honestly about pushing yourself and having a good time. And we'll have some folks come out and they'll walk the whole course. Just they want a fun day with their friends outside, and a lot of the obstacles are quite a bit of fun. And they'll hang out on course for a while and just help other participants while they're out there. And then some folks will go out and they just want to blast the course as fast as they can, and you can sort of do that too. Myself, it depends on the weekend. Sometimes I want to just go out with some friends and have a good time, and sometimes I want to see how quick I can get around the course. So the only events we do that are timed or have rankings is that endurance series that I mentioned. So those 8, 12, and 24-hour events. Mm-hmm. There is a final standing. There's prize money for World's Toughest Mudder. But our core events at 5, 10, 15K, no time, no place. Just it's about the adventure, not about a winner or loser.
So it just seems like that is just really relevant to health and fitness, because it's allowing inspiration across levels of people who are very used to running long distances and are very physically fit, to those that have been intimidated, just by the race number and the fact that you have to, place. And so I think that's fantastic. What do you know? And you haven't been with the company since its inception, correct? You joined at a later time?
Pretty early on I joined. So I originally joined back in 2012. So the company was about a year and a half old when I joined. We were still about 20 some odd people. So I was actually with Tough Mudder for 6 years during that heavy growth phase then. And then I went off and did my kombucha business for a few years, and I rejoined sort of in the new iteration of the company. So I've seen it at many different stages along the way.
So I misspoke. You have been on it early. So then tell me a little bit about what the philosophy and the motivation is behind Tough Mudder.
Yeah, so it's honestly all about pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and going on an adventure. We sort of beat the drum with that word, but it really is about us laying out challenges, and then our participants, our customers coming out and experiencing them in their own way. And we can't script a lot of the things that happen there, right? With some of the most impactful things you see at a Tough Mudder event are these teamwork-based experiences where you see strangers meet on the course, or you see a mother and a daughter running the event together, and just having these amazing, you can see the spark in the mind when they show up and they don't quite know what to expect, and they get out on course and they're just bonding like they never thought they would. They're having this amazing, they're being really active, but it doesn't necessarily feel like you're going out to run a race. That athleticism and that intimidation factor you get when you're standing at the start line to a race isn't there. So it's a really great way for folks to get outside and to bond and have that camaraderie and just push themselves outside their comfort zone. Some of the things we have on our courses are more about mental, overcoming mental obstacles than physical. So some of the things, are there's an intimidation factor that goes beyond whether you're afraid of heights or, a bunch of different challenges we put out there on the course kind of trigger certain reactions by design that, leave you feeling when you cross the finish line like you've really overcome, a series of challenges, not just like, you went for a walk in the park or you went out and ran a 5K.
Yeah, you just led right into my next question, which was, what are some of these obstacles? And I'm sure we could read this online, but since I have you here, I was going to ask you, what are some examples?
Yeah, no problem. So I'll give you a couple of the heavy hitters. Everest is a sort of longtime fan favorite. It's a giant quarter pipe with a slicked up surface that you have to run up and over. That for almost everyone will require quite a bit of teamwork. Block Ness Monster is a really cool sort of innovative feature that we came out with a couple years ago, which are these big rotating blocks in a pit of water that, if you try to get up on your own, it just spins back on you. But it's almost like a puzzle to figure out with a team where if you get the block turning and you roll it together, you get some momentum and it'll actually, you can pull each other over the blocks as you go through it. So that one, video is worth a million words there, but this really engaging, cool, fun, teamwork based feature. We also have Funky Monkey, which is our take on monkey bars, big truss-based, peaked monkey bars that have some rotating rings and some different, a couple different twists in there to make it challenging and interesting. And then, the last one I'll touch on is Mutterhorn, which is our gigantic A-frame. It's 30 some odd feet in the air. You're climbing up and you're under a cargo net kind of climbing up the thing. But if you're afraid of heights, you can see the thing coming a mile away. And it's just a really cool, it's one of the last features on the course. And it's just, it's one of those things you just remember when you're at the top of that, it leaves an impression. So that's a subset, from our 5K course has 13 obstacles, our 10K course has 20 obstacles, and then our 15K course has 30 obstacles. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in between there.
Wow, that's a lot. It's more obstacles per K than I would have imagined. So So tell me, if I haven't run one, which I haven't, or anyone else, what would you tell them before they signed up for a race?
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend anyone that's looking to come out, if you can rope some friends and family into it. It's a great time. It's a great team building experience with coworkers. It's really cool to come out with a group and come do it. I check out some of the videos on our website of the obstacles just to get excited about. I can promise you it's nothing is as intimidating as you might think it is when you get there. It's far more accessible and achievable when you're on the ground, but it's fun to go on there with friends and look around and get excited about the things you'll get to try out. Bring some shoes so you don't mind getting muddy, bring some clothes you don't mind getting muddy. But really just encourage people to come on out and join us. We promise you won't regret it.
And we talked about the health benefits here, and you mentioned something that's fantastic. It's not just the physical benefits, there's that mental aspect. I mean, do you see that in the Tough Mudder community, that people are not, you can't see them before and after and say, wow, you look healthier, but it's a pretty healthy, supportive community is my understanding.
Yeah, so the community is really amazing in a lot of ways. You'll stand in the start chute, and Sean Corvell's our start line MC. It is really powerful, gives these really powerful start speeches, and you can look around there and you just see people coming out to run for all different reasons. Tons of people come out to run for a cause, whether they're raising money for charity or they lost a loved one, and this is their sort of bonding experience to come out and overcome some of those traumas. And the community is also really inclusive. So, I mentioned a little bit earlier, some people will just come out for the whole weekend to do nothing but hang out on course and help strangers at obstacles. That's just, it's almost like a volunteer experience just for them to be on the course, pulling people over obstacles that are too hard, or giving pointers for people who are coming to run their first event. So it's this amazing community that has just grown year on year on year. You start to recognize, when you're like me and you're at a bunch of the events, you start to recognize these faces for whom, Tough Mudder has changed their lives, and in turn they're helping, new participants change theirs.
How big is the company now, roughly? I mean, you can give me staff or you can give me events, whatever, to understand the volume of the company.
Yeah, so we're about 100 staff. We have 30 plus events in the US, but we're worldwide now as well. So we have, for a few years now, we've had a UK office putting on events throughout the United Kingdom. We have a Western European business that's just being relaunched this upcoming year. We have, events in Australia. We have licensed events in Mexico, throughout Asia. So sort of worldwide operation. And post-COVID coming back on a growth trajectory with more events each year.
And you mentioned Vermont. So tell us a little bit about past Vermont experiences and what you have coming up in the future.
Yeah, so Vermont's always been one of our favorite states to come to, favorite regions to come to. You guys know it's beautiful. There's amazing outdoor activities to do up there, and we're really excited to be back in the state. So our event this year is on June 4th and 5th at Stratton, which is going to be just incredible. Beautiful venue there. We've got a really great course with some great obstacles lined up for it. We have the 5K and the 15K distances on Saturday, and then Sunday we have the 5K and the 10K. So sort of whatever distance you're in the mood to run, you can run it over the course of that weekend. And it should be a great blend. We love ski mountain venues. It gives us so much, our course designers, a lot of natural features to play with. And it's just, it's an amazing way to get outside. It's something, if you like to do weekend hikes, it's a cool thing to do. That's just a little bit different. If you like to run 5Ks, it's a cool thing that's a little different. So we're excited to be back in the community and to be up there this year.
Are there spots available, or is it filled? I don't even know how. I know it's very popular, but I don't know how many spaces you typically have.
Yeah. So it's not full yet, but selling out. We have a price increase just at the end of this month as well. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this episode goes up this week through the end of March. There's still lower price tickets before they roll up on April 1st. There's start times are selling out. So oftentimes the morning waves will fill up more quickly than the afternoon waves. So recommend everyone pop onto toughmudder.com, pull up the New England event, and register sooner rather than later.
It shows me just not thinking through it. That, of course, there's waves. In my head, everyone started at once, but that's not how that's not how you get the most people through it and the most people to enjoy the experience, right? So that's great. That's so great. And so Stratton, you've had an event, I believe it was several years ago. Didn't you have one at Mount Snow or one of the other ski mountains? Just remember.
Yeah, previously we were at Mount Snow for a few years. Another great mountain, great experience. That was one of my first events ever. Going way back, it was up there, and it was impactful. Those mountains are amazing. It's so nice to be back up.
Well, I'm so glad to have you on the show to talk about Tough Mudder. Again, the intimidation factor can really turn people off from standard races. And it may be, and I don't know this, you may have experienced that a Tough Mudder is a good way to just start doing any type of races. They can do a Tough Mudder, not worry about timing and their name being up on a board with the ranking. And then eventually, if they do want to get into some timed races, just running races or who knows, there's all types of races these days that people can get involved with and really help both their physical health and their mental health. Let me just ask you a little personally again. So tell me about your ultra marathon experience.
Yeah, so I consider myself very lucky. I was introduced to them through Tough Mudder, the one event format I mentioned, World's Toughest Mudder, the 24-hour event. A couple of coworkers back in 2013 convinced me to go out and just see what it was like, see how far we could go. It's that 5-mile loop, so you're not roped into any given distance. And me and my one coworker went much further than we thought, probably much further than I trained for. And I sort of caught the bug. So I started going back, every year and just training, trying to set my sights higher for mileage, set my, wanting to get into the top 10, the top 5, really get competitive. And that led me into ultras at large. So I've done, tried to do about one a year. And it's really life-changing. If you've run ultra marathons, they really expose, what your perceived limits are and what your actual limits are. doesn't sound, 100 miles sounds impossible. You realize over running 100 miles, it's not impossible. You can push yourself way, way further than you ever thought you could. You have to want it. You have to be willing to go for it. But it ends up creeping into the other areas of your life, and the way, I talk to people all the time now about fitness, and it's just, whether it's a Tough Mudder 5K or an ultra or anything in between, it's like we all think we can only do so much, and so much of the narrative is, well, don't go too hard, don't, if you're not comfortable, don't. But sometimes you just need that little, don't be reckless, but step in and try it. Just try a little bit, try something that's not timed, just see how it feels. And more oftentimes than not, you do that and you realize, like, oh, I could have done more. I could have done a lot more, or, I felt really good after I did that thing, so maybe I want to try it again. And it just, over medium, long term, you see how it affects your life in such positive ways.
Absolutely. You're so right about how it's about the race, but then it's how you translate that. I know during ultra runs, I quit many times in my head, but somehow end up at the finish line, at least most of the time. And it's funny how you go through this psychological up and down, and then the end comes. It was the same when we were working through this pandemic here over the past couple of years. We pretty quickly here in this organization, we equated running ultra marathons. We said this is not going to be a 5K or a 10K. It's not going to even be a marathon. It's going to be one of those ultra marathons that unfortunately we don't even know where the end is. And I think that helped us pace ourselves, for lack of a better term, and understand that there will be ups and downs, and that those are okay, and we have to pay attention to them as well, just like you have to when you're running a really long race. Have you been on to any ultras in Vermont? Because we have a few.
I haven't. I would love to. I've done more further south and out west, so a bunch out, sort of in the Nevada area, down in Florida, down in Tennessee. And then I would absolutely love to. A lot of the event cancellations over the past year or two threw my plans off, but I'm overdue now and itching for it. So I'll have to talk to you afterwards about some recommendations.
No, that sounds great. We'll definitely do that. Well, tell us as we sort of close here a little bit, what you're looking forward to personally and then professionally, maybe with Tough Mudder, but also on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think now travel's starting to open up again. I love to travel, and I'm really, I'm eager to get back out and, do some more ultra marathons, but also just broader travel around the world, hopefully here coming up soon. Excited to get back on some ultra courses, since it's been a little bit with all those cancellations through the past couple of years. And then, yeah, for Tough Mudder, we've got new obstacles coming this year. Really excited about. I've been working with my team on the design and the rollout of those. Further international expansion, which is really exciting. And we have some other programs sort of in the queue right now. One around sustainability, which is something I'm personally very passionate about, positioning Tough Mudder to be a sustainable player in sport. And then our adaptive athlete program, which we're working really hard on right now. We already have some amazing adaptive athletes that come out to our events, and some of the most inspiring things you'll ever see are an athlete in a wheelchair going for 24 hours straight on our World's Toughest Mudder course with a team that just will not stop, and overcoming just incredible challenges there. So we're working on a wider program to help get adaptive athletes out to our events and sort of share that same all of those benefits of overcoming these perceived barriers. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff in the queue for us.
That's great, Chris. I love both of those, sustainability and the adaptive focus. That's just, that's excellent. It shows that the company is interested in its mission, which is very important. So thank you so much for coming today. I'd also like to thank Mike Cutler from CAT TV, Ray Smith from Southwestern Vermont Healthcare, Ashley Jowett from Southwestern Vermont Healthcare. I'm Trey Dobson. Go out and find joy in everything you do, even in the face of adversity. And we will see you guys next week.